So I've only been out here for a few minutes, but I am cold. My body's producing heat, but I can't hold on to it. And that's because the cold air is leaching it out of me faster than I can replace it. There, this is a little bit better. This coat is preventing my body heat from leaving because it's forcing it to go through this cloth, which is a poor conductor of heat. So I get to retain more of it for myself. That's the ticket. Now I'm forcing my body heat to go through two poor conductors, air and cloth. Our homes create heat too, and holding on to that heat is the job of insulation. What is insulation? How does it work? Why did people shove acorns in their walls in the 1900s? Or asbestos in Greece? And how do you install insulation in your own home? We're gonna learn all of that and more. Just let's go inside and get warm first. So, you may be asking yourself, why does insulation matter? It's just some fuzzy pink stuff in the attic hiding, no big deal, right? Actually, it is. 70 to 80% of all energy consumption in our homes is due to heating and cooling. So proper insulation, it is key. Now, insulation works based on the way heat moves. So it will move from warmer areas to cooler areas until the temperature difference is zero. Okay, what that means is that if you have a space that is warm and a space that is cool, the heat actually travels to the cool space until those two spaces are the same temperature. In the winter, that means that the heat in your house will constantly be trying to flow from the warm indoors to the cold outdoors. My dad, he used to always say, "Close the door, we don't want to heat the whole world." And, well, he's kind of right. To keep that warmth in, we need to prevent the warm air from escaping. So, thanks, Dad. Heat travels in a few different ways, the main two being through direct contact and through gases and liquids. Insulation prevents both types of heat loss by putting several layers of air and then material between your living space and the outdoors. Air is a poor heat conductor, so pockets of air slow the convective movement of the heat. In contrast, glass is a good heat conductor, which is why when you touch your windows in the winter, it's always freezing. These glass areas are where we lose so much heat, so it's so important to have proper insulation everywhere else in your house. Today, we use a wide variety of high-tech substances for insulation, but in the past, people had to be a bit more creative with natural materials. In very cold climates, people often use the earth itself as an insulator. Building an earth-sheltered home allowed them to take advantage of the density of the dirt. The oldest earth-sheltered homes are from around 3000 BC, and they're in Orkney Island, Scotland. In ancient Rome, cork was a popular insulator. It was used as a roof insulation as well as a shoe sole material. For the same reason, it kept both feet and homes cool. The ancient Greeks, these guys, they actually used asbestos as an insulating material, especially in the areas that were exposed to extreme heat. And that's because this material was thought to have mystical qualities because it was so resistant to flames. And they actually named it asbestos because it means inextinguishable. Interestingly enough, the Greeks knew about the harmful effects of asbestos even then. They noted that slaves that worked with asbestos developed a type of lung sickness, but their positive benefits were seen as being worth the cost. In Northern Europe, straw roofs and clay and straw walls made for strong insulation. Thatched roofs became the norm, and in fact, they were the only roofing available in England until the 1880s, when slate from Wales became more easily transported. There are actually still around 1,000 full-time thatchers still working in the UK today, holding strong. The world of insulation really began to change rapidly with the onset of the Industrial Revolution. And these regional differences began to vanish. New techniques and materials became available, and the more modern construction materials that we all know today, wood, metal, glass, they needed additional insulation to maintain a home's internal temperature. As we enter the 20th century, many homes were using wood shavings and sawdust as insulation, since, of course, they were cheap. We can also find homes with newspaper stuffed in the walls, like mine, or even acorns and chestnuts, which I know sounds super crazy, but these things actually worked as insulation. They just didn't work that well. It was around this time that insulation panels started to be manufactured, starting with wood wool. This mixed wood shavings and magnesite and cement. Now, this particular mixture, it didn't work that well because it was highly flammable. Not good. but it started the spread of wool insulation worldwide. There were many other forms of insulation available, including ones made from sugar manufacturing byproducts and even straw bales. But the big change came when plastic foam insulation was created. Polystyrene foam was first produced by Dow in the 1940s, and their first insulating product, you may know it, called styrofoam, was sold starting in 1943. Today, natural insulation only makes up around 5% of insulation materials produced in the world, and artificial insulation, well, that's the standard. Now we know a lot about insulation history, but there's so many options now. I've got Scott, my insulation specialist.
Thank you.
And he's gonna talk about what we need for what and where and all that jazz. So talk about our standard insulation.
So this is fiberglass. This is the standard insulation that is typically put in homes, additions, making your house more efficient. You definitely want to start with fiberglass. That's kind of your base tier, and that's what you'll see typically in houses. And they come in different thicknesses. The different thicknesses have a different R values for
climate zones,
for
or
different
where you
climate
live.
zones, or where you want to put it for the walls, for the roof, for your
Gotcha.
floor system, the garage ceiling. You want to put different size insulation depending on where you live and what's recommended for that.
And actually, speaking of that, we've got some over here that's specific to...
Yeah, you'll typically, this is what's called a blown-in insulation, and that's typically, you will only see that in an attic, and it looks like snow, if you will, but it's an itchy snow, so you don't want to be doing any snow
Making
angels
any
in
snowballs.
it. And they just blow it into the attic, on the attic floor, and it settles.
So what is this thing? Tell me how this comes into play.
So this is a radiant barrier. A radiant barrier reflects radiant heat, which is just one of the heat transfers in a house. But it's the majority of your heat gain in the summertime and your heat loss in the wintertime. So where you want to put this is actually over your insulation itself. And you typically will see this in the attic. So if you put a loose fill insulation or a bat on the attic floor, you want to put this radiant barrier over like a blanket that lays on top of it.
So we talked about our standard, we talked about an attic, but tell me what spray foam is and where that lands in all this.
Yeah, so spray foam is a premium insulation product. It's going to be a better product than a fiberglass because of a couple main reasons. One is spray foam goes on paper thin and expands out over 100 times. So what it does is it creates a nice fill and gets all the nooks and crannies and creates a nice seal.
And spray foam goes anywhere?
Spray foam will go on your envelope, on the outside envelope, so exterior walls, on the roof deck, or in the floor system, on your garage ceilings. Another main benefit that foam provides that fiberglass does not is foam is an air sealer. So it stops that air movement, which is huge.
So we've got the basics of what insulation does and where it comes from, but how do we choose the stuff we need for our homes and how much should we use? Okay, so first, you're gonna start by air sealing your home, which means looking for leaks and fixing them. You can even have a professional come over and test your home to see where you're losing heat. Then you're gonna wanna caulk and weather strip doors and windows that are leaking air and look for loose fits. You can actually place $1 in a window or door and then shut it. If you slide that dollar right out, it's too loose and you should add weather stripping or replace that door or window. The next step is to determine how much insulation you need and which R value is right for you. So what's R value? This is it. This is R30 and this is R13, but what does it mean? Well, simply put, it's how resistant the insulation is to conductive heat flow. That's easy, right? So the higher the R value number is, the more effective it is. So you can see this one right here, R30, is thicker than R13. So it has more air pockets, which actually is trapping more of that warm air. So when you get it, don't compress it down, because that air is actually helping you stay warm. How much do you need? Well, that depends on where you live. The Department of Energy has divided the country into different climate zones, and they all need different levels of insulation. So if we're insulating, let's say, an attic in southern Florida, we're gonna use R30 for that. But if we're insulating an attic in northern Minnesota, we're gonna wanna use R60. So make sure you check the chart and see what kind of insulation is right for your climate. So if you are going to use this standard fiberglass insulation, you definitely need to wear gloves to avoid getting any of these fibers in your skin or your hair because it itches like crazy. You also want to wear a mask and a hat or a hood. You place the bat into position and just push the edges down, making sure there's no gaps. If you have an outlet or junction, split the bat and make sure some of it goes behind the box to avoid an air leak around the outlet. If your insulation has paper backing on it, make sure the paper part is facing the room. So paper to the people. The fiberglass should be facing the outdoors. If you have insulation without paper on it, you'll need some kind of other vapor barrier between the fiberglass and your room, usually plastic. For spaces around doors and windows, we can use a low expansion foam like this. This will keep any drafts from forming around your doors and windows. This style of fiberglass is still the most popular, but what does the future hold? Recycled materials are definitely on the rise. In fact, there's even an insulation made from recycled denim. Think about that when you put on your blue jeans. There have also been great innovations in the worlds of nanotechnology and aerogels that could completely change the way we insulate our homes. But no matter what, the principle's always going to be the same: preventing the transfer of heat to make our homes more comfortable and more efficient. Thanks for joining me. I hope that you now know way too much about insulation. Do you have a topic that you'd like us to dive into? Just let me know in the comments. See you next time.